to get started here, on the basic training for a farm dog, what are the foundational skills every farm dog should have?
If I were to look at the main things that a farm dog is a bit of a broad spectrum too, because you have cattle dogs, you have herding dogs, you have livestock guardian dogs. These all basically fall under the umbrella of of a farm dog.
More like a border collie, or
Yeah, like a border collie would be more of a herding
okay,
dog. This is a dog that would gather the livestock, right? A cattle dog would basically be the same thing, but a cattle dog, typically they're dealing with larger livestock. So cattle dogs typically are a little bit more, they're a little bit more stout, they're a little bit more stocky, because they're dealing with, cows. So they have to be stocky because they're gonna get kicked, they're gonna be, they're going to be pushed around. And then you obviously have the livestock guardian dogs, which these dogs do not do herding. They don't move sheep or cows around. What basically they do is they're just there as a presence to deter predators and things like that. So these are all
that'd be like
various
Great
types of,
Pyrenees.
yeah, Great Pyrenees, Cuvas, Caucasian Ovchakas, I mean, these are the stereotypical livestock guardian dogs, but other dogs can also fill that role. But anyway, so I just wanted to maybe add a little bit of clarification to that, just because the term farm dog is broad, and you have these different categories. But to answer your question, some basic skills would definitely be independence, and it's more not so much of a skill as much as of a temperament trait.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's sort of what we would call personality trait. And it's not so much of a skill. It's not something you can particularly teach. It's something you rather recognize in the animal, and you select and you go, okay, this animal has enough independence, uh, has enough, not a whole lot of biddability. So because it has these temperament traits, this would indicate that this would be a good candidate for this type of work. And these are the same traits that would make it a bad pet, actually. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
If you think
again,
about it, good working dogs normally have temperament traits that would make them not the most ideal pets.
yeah. We learned. We've had a few dogs come through this past year that are quote unquote working dogs, and
Mm-hmm.
it night and day difference of finding them a home.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, you're
definitely.
actually finding them a job.
Exactly,
Uh,
exactly.
and it's interesting talking to the people that have taken the dogs, how, the applications that they're using them in, and it's
Yeah,
like I wouldn't enjoy that, but they do. So,
yeah, yeah.
um, well, on herding training, how do you begin training a dog for herding livestock?
So I can speak a little bit. I'm familiar with it,
Okay.
but it is not my area of expertise. So I just want to put a little bit of that disclaimer.
Okay.
I don't. It's not something I do every week, but I'm familiar enough with it. So normally, what they'll do is for a herding, specifically for a herding type of dog, what they'll do is first, you want a dog with high predatory drive. And to break down predatory drive, which I feel probably at least a little bit important just to understand the question. Predatory drive is a series of behaviors. A dog that is engaged in predatory drive or predatory behavior has a number of options. They can chase. They can stalk. So stalking is not chasing. That's just when they're just kind of doing this. They're glaring, they're staring, they're just ready to pounce. That's stalking. They can chase. Chase is just as it implies, they're chasing. They can grab, which is now biting. Then after that, they can kill,
Mm-hmm.
which is also part of the predatory sequence. Then they can dissect, which means they'll not only satisfy with grabbing and killing, but they'll actually just tear it, shred it, and then they can consume, which is the final step of the predatory sequence. naturally, when we're selecting herding dogs, we're selecting dogs that are more on the first few steps of the predatory sequence. We don't want a dog that the predatory drive is going all the way to, they want to kill the sheep, eat them, dissect them, and consume them, because naturally that would be a very destructive dog. And though there are dogs that do, these are dogs that obviously we want to work on. These are typically not the dogs that would make ideal herding dogs. But once we have the right candidate, we go, okay, this dog likes to stalk, check. This dog likes to chase, check. This dog likes to nip, and that's as far as it'll go, check. Again, these are traits that will make it not a good pet. But when we have these traits in a dog, we go, okay, this dog actually has the traits for that. Some of the things that they'll do to start training is they'll put him, first they'll test him, they'll evaluate him. So they'll put him around 1 or 2 sheep. And so what they're looking for is they're looking for a dog that has enough bit of confidence. Obviously, if you're testing a very young dog, we wouldn't hold it against a dog to not have a whole lot of confidence. Probably never seen a sheep in their lives. But if you are testing a bit of a more mature dog, regardless of how much stalking, how much chasing, how much snipping they want to do, if you put them in front of sheep and they start shaking and trembling, not a good candidate. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You want to have enough of that confidence where they'll go, all right, I don't mind, I'll play, I'll chase. So then essentially start with that. They'll put them around a bunch of sheep, and they'll, the trainer will have the dog on a bit of a long line and like a long horse crop. The horse crop is just basically giving them a little bit of guidance. It's also to, like, if the dog starts to nip a little bit too hard, the trainer will kind of use the horse crop to kind of remind the dog, hey, don't go too hard. So it's just a matter of going, all right, we're going to put you in this pen. We're going to put a couple of sheep. The sheep have to be somewhat young and a bit naive as well, because sheep also have temperaments. You put a very bullish, a bunch of bullish sheep in there, they're just going to run all over that dog. So they'll basically start the training in a pen. The trainer has the dog on a long line. The trainer has a horse crop, and they'll just basically teach the dog to go, left, right, to just get a feel for moving the sheep. Essentially, that's kind of how it is. And then from there, they just make the pen larger, the area larger and larger. Then eventually they add more sheep. And eventually what they'll do is they'll add some other behaviors like, all right, stay and, stalk. Now do the stalking, the chasing, but a little bit slower. And again, a lot of it is instinctive temperament for the dog, where they go, okay, I have all these inherent traits, inherent behaviors that I want to express. And the trainer basically tells them, now is the time for stalking. Now is the time for chasing. Now is the time for nipping, because sometimes that's something that they have to do.
And YouTube finds the need to show me odd videos for dogs all the time. And I think we've all seen the variety of this one where the dog goes running in with a bunch of sheep, and next thing you know, it's running on top of them.
It's amazing. I've seen sheep training in action, and it's so fascinating to watch it live, to watch it in person, because you see these very skilled dogs with a lot of sheep. The sheep are scattered all over the place, and the trainer, with just a whistle, they have a herding whistle, and the whistle has a bunch of tone ranges to it, and it basically, a certain range, certain sound of that same whistle will indicate to the dog go left. Another sound will indicate to the dog go right. Another sound will indicate to the dog stop. Another sound will indicate to the dog stalk. So then the dog will just stalk. And you'll see these, sometimes they'll work in groups. But even if it's just one dog, you'll see this dog just take a bunch of scattered sheep in a large area where the dog is going so far you can barely see the dog just do this amazing work. And it's so fascinating to watch. But, just like all training, it starts with just, like I explained, just the short little pen, right, with like 1 or 2 sheep. And then from there you progress. But yeah, it's really interesting, And then again, with the cattle dogs, they're doing the same thing, but essentially, with different types of dogs and larger animals. Sheep is not gonna. You look at a border collie. Border collies are great for this, but border collies are a little bit more, a little bit thinner, a little bit more lean. You can't have a border collie, get kicked by a cow, too much. But you look at like a blue heeler, which are more compact, they're a little bit stockier, right? You look at a Catahoula. Again, they're much more stocky, much more compact. Like they're made to be like tossed around, and nothing's gonna happen to them. But essentially, it's a very similar type of work. It's fascinating to observe.
Regarding guarding the livestock, I mean, are you able to train a dog to protect the livestock from predators, or does that just come secondhand to the dog?
So it's normally a different type of work, different job description, and normally the dog that is good for that, it's normally a different type of dog, and here's why. Like the border collies, like the type of work that we just went over, herding the sheep. When you see these dogs work doing that, they love it. Like you see their eyes just light up because they are allowed to go in full predatory mode. So these dogs are typically not living with the sheep. Because can you imagine, having access to this sheep in an uncontrolled manner without a handler, a trainer telling them where to go, and how to go about it? You know what I mean? They just drive themselves crazy. So normally these dogs are put away when they're not needed for the sheep. Normally that's how it is. So the type of dog that would be ideal for the livestock guardian, where they would deter predators, is normally a type of dog that will live with the sheep. Because this is the type of dog that will live with the sheep, you don't want this dog to have high predatory drive. Do you see what I mean? Because they'll be chasing sheep all the time. So for that reason, it's normally a different type of dog. Now the one dog is very versatile, and back in the early 1900s, I'm sure still to this day, but it was more so because it was an actual breed suitability test in Germany. But the one dog that was amazing and much more versatile, that could actually do both, be a good deterrent, live with the sheep, but also do a lot of the chasing, was the German Shepherd, which is why it's a breed that is revered in Germany and in Europe, for good reason, because they have the stable enough temperament where they can, turn it off, but they also have the drive where they can turn it on and go into full predatory mode at the same time. So that would be one dog that could essentially, was used in many instances to be a little bit of both, where with the shepherd, the person could have, this type of dog. But when you have more specialized breeds like the border collie as an example, again, normally not the type of dog that would necessarily be ideal to live with the sheep constantly. I'm sure there are dogs that can do that. I'm sure there are individuals that can do that, and I'm sure there are people that have done it and maybe even continue to do it. But generally, it's a different type of dog for that reason.
And then this next question, you've pretty much already answered it. You talked about the different types of dogs and approaches here, but regarding boundaries, how can you teach a farm dog to respect boundaries and stay within a certain area on the farm?
That is such a nice, interesting topic, because the way
Regina for that.
no, that's a really good question. So the way it was done, like a very long time ago, and the way it still probably gets done, maybe not as much now because the world is changing, advancing technologically, but in very remote villages around the world, and it was more and more so years and years ago, and I only know this through research that's been done by people that have really studied this, have gone to remote areas. What they would do is, before they were, and even in very remote areas, they don't have fences like we have here in Texas, right? It's just big, larger areas. So, like in that instance, what is a boundary? There is no,
what is
there is no boundary there. So what they would do is they would select a dog, and sometimes these could be like street dogs. Again, the remote villages would do this. They didn't have like a breeding program. They would just get like basically street dogs. And what they would do from a very early age, like as young as like 4 weeks of age, they would take these puppies off the litter, and they would place it to live with the livestock. And from a very young age, basically during the forming and early programming stages of this puppy's brain, it was taken out of the litter, right? And a dog's first 6 weeks of their lives are very important. That's why they're typically with their mom. They're learning how to be dogs. They're learning dog language. Well, in those 6 weeks, if you pull them out before that and you put them in a different environment, they don't learn to be dogs. This is why you don't really want to take a puppy off a litter at 3 weeks of age and then take it into a home. It's normally why breeders will not sell their puppies until about 7 or 8 weeks of age, because the first 6 weeks are that important. Because it literally teaches a dog, you are a dog, and this is how dogs behave, and this is how dogs communicate. Well, what they did years and years ago, and what they still do in some of these remote villages, will grab these dogs, and then they would, during that window, and then they would place them with the cattle, with the livestock. Well, what would happen then is the dog would grow up basically believing that it was just one of them. You know what I mean? It was just, this is just, I'm a sheep, basically, essentially. And then it would gain this sense of, again, depending on the temperament, but it would gain this sense of territorialness, protectiveness, and then as far as the boundary, well, the boundary is easy. You just go as far as the sheep go. You know what I mean? And now this is now a matter of, where do the sheep go? Well, that's now a matter of the person, the shepherd himself going, today we're going to go, east, right? Tomorrow we're going to go a little bit north, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what happens is the dogs then learn, okay, I go where the sheep go. The dog would sleep there. It would eat. It would just live there among them. So then this would also be a great deterrent for, predators also. But yeah, so that would basically be, how they would train the sheepdogs, but also it would be how, how they would stay within that boundary. They basically pull them out early on. Now, nowadays, obviously, there's a lot of situational factors that go into it. We're talking about, is your area fenced in? Well, then that's your boundary, right? Are we pulling in an older dog, so not a dog that we pulled out of a litter? Are we pulling in an older dog? Well, that's another factor that goes into it. Do we have a dog that is more interested in, in exploring? Well, we might have to do some training. Some of that training might include invisible fence, which is basically, this is exactly what it sounds like. It's an invisible fence. We'll let the dog know there's an area right around here that you don't want to go past. You go past it, it's uncomfortable. You stay inside this area, it's not uncomfortable. So these are, factors that go into how do we teach them to stay within that boundary.
Okay. Didn't think about puppies being pulled.
Yeah.
And put with the herd, but it makes sense.
And there is research that, and a lot of observation has been done by these two. I know they were professors at a university. I just don't know all the details of their expertise, but I know they went pretty much through various parts of the world to explore that, and that's one of the things that they noticed, that was a common denominator in various villages that utilize dogs in a very similar way. But yeah,
Very interesting.
very
Very
fascinating.
interesting on that. What are some essential safety commands for farm dogs, especially when working with heavy machinery or large animals? You've talked about it earlier that there's certain dog breeds that around large animals that you can't. A border collie, it's not the ideal dog. You need a stouter dog.
Oh yeah,
to
yeah,
be
absolutely.
able to run with the pack, I guess.
Get kicked around,
Yeah.
like some of these dogs, and you've probably seen some of these videos. They get kicked hard.
Yes.
Like you see, blue heeler. They're like stout, short legs. I mean, even corgis. You're familiar with corgis? One of the reasons that they're bred that way, and one of the reasons that corgis are sometimes very difficult to work with, because they have this inherent cattle dog trait. It's because they're so short and stocky that they can stand getting kicked. Right? You have a dog that is a little bit longer, leaner, like the border collie. Yeah, I'm sure they can get kicked here and there, but naturally the risk factor is a little bit higher. But to answer your question, which was specifically safety, right? One of the biggest safety things for, I would say, all outdoor dogs, and it's not just specific to farm dogs, but really even outdoor dogs. One of the biggest safety components, especially down here in the South, is snake avoidance training.
See, I was just thinking about that on your last question.
Yeah.
For them going around and looking for threats, but snakes, well,
Yeah.
here in Central Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's more of a threat in certain parts of the world, not much of a threat in other parts of the world.
Right.
But here, definitely would be more of a big safety thing, because yes, snakes are weird enough that some dogs will naturally go, I don't like that, I don't recognize it. But to a lot of dogs, it triggers curiosity. So when it triggers curiosity, now you have a problem, because a snake has a pretty long strike, right? Dogs are curious. They'll go investigate. That's when they get bit in the face a lot of times. So snake avoidance training is probably top priority for an outdoor dog, and especially for a farm dog, obviously. Farm dog, whether it's a herding dog, whether it's a cattle dog, or it's a livestock guardian dog.
We had somebody deliver they donated some pins to us, and they were telling us a story that they live out on a ranch, and they had the snake training done for their dogs.
Yeah.
And the lady was telling us, I believe not once but twice, the snake training has paid off. Because
Yeah.
the dog is alerted them
Yeah.
to coming off their porch and fixing to step down on some steps, and there was another scenario too, that the dog,
Yeah.
but they had learned that the behavior that the dog put on from the snake training was like, oh, that means Fido, be quiet. No, there's an issue.
We did schedule one class, and at that time there was just not a lot of attendance, so we had to cancel. But that might be something we'll look into.
Yeah.
Doing another snake avoidance class.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely helpful.
But she said the lady was telling us she knows the specific sound, the behavior
Yeah.
her dog will make when there's a threat of a snake.
That is a very unique change of behavior for each dog as well. Some dogs will bark at it. Some dogs will just completely avoid, not even say anything.
Lassie always barked.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it depends. Like, if I have a herding dog, and this is probably, it would make sense, you wouldn't necessarily want the herding dog to stop working to go, there's a snake, there's a snake, there's a snake. Well, and same thing with the retriever dogs, which retriever dogs are always working outdoors. This is one of the dogs that get the snake training, snake avoidance training. When they have to retrieve a bird, you don't want them to, in the middle of that retrieve, stop and go, there's a snake, there's a snake, there's a snake. What they'll do a lot of times is they'll go in a straight line, and then they'll make this big loop around something and then they'll keep going, that's usually when you know, okay, there was a snake there. So instead of it going in a straight line, it kind of went, did this little detour, and then went. So it avoided that section. It's very likely that there was a snake there. Again, it would be a temperament, very unique, specific set of behaviors by each dog. Well, some will go, I'm going to ignore it. I don't care. I'm just going to ignore it. And some dogs are going to go, there's something there, there's something there, there's something there.
And I realize it got off a little bit because we're talking about this, getting the snake training for your personal dog.
Mm-hmm.
You're finding out how your dog is going to behave.
Yeah, after the
Yeah.
training, you'll
Yeah,
notice.
Yeah, you'll know.
Yeah.
But in this particular instance, if we can see from a safety point of view, like your herding dog sees the snake, well, obviously you don't want to bring the whole herd to the snake.
Right. Yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It would make, I don't know how sheep react to snake. I know sheep are very, because they're prey animals, they're always kind of on guard. So I would imagine they probably do the same thing instinctively. But yeah.
So are there any common behavioral issues that farm dogs face, and how can they be addressed?
I would say, as an outdoor, because that's essentially what they are. A lot of times they're outdoor dogs. One of the common behavioral issues that, if there was a common denominator, I would probably say maybe they're more subject to getting distracted by prey. Bunny. I would imagine that that's probably one of, yeah. Another one that I would say and this is common sense. One that will probably be a common denominator among all these dogs would probably be their lack of biddability when it comes to the human aspect of it. Again, these are dogs that the reason that they are probably amazing farm dogs is because they're probably not the best pet dogs, probably not the best companions. And I'm sure there is someone out there that will probably go, no, that's not true. My dog is both. But that's more the exception, not the rule. As a rule in general, if a dog is going to be amazing, with herding, an amazing outdoor dog, it's because they have such independence that they don't really need you, which automatically indicates they're probably going to give you a bit of a harder time when it comes to, listening to you, responding to you, wanting to work for you. So these are probably traits that you're likely to see across the board with farm dogs and outdoor dogs, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with you. You've got these people will have their puppies,
Mm-hmm.
and neighbors come over and go, "Oh, there's the puppy. Don't touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't touch it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a farm dog. That's a training dog. That's a work dog.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
They don't
absolutely.
want the human interaction with it. They don't want to domesticate it. They want it to be a full.
You're a working dog.
Yeah. I don't want you distracted when they come over here.
Yeah.
We've come across a few people that they've had puppies and they're like, that's hands off.
And in rural areas, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
City people don't
No,
understand it.
it's a different frame of mind, a different concept.
Completely, yeah.
Yeah, it was a little different when it was explained to me. When that dog has a purpose, and that purpose is a job.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it's not laying upside down on the bed or the couch. It's to work.
Yeah.
So we're in the Texas heat now. We're hopefully we're coming out of it now. But how would you train these farm dogs for the physical and mental demands for the long work days on a farm, especially doing the Texas heat, hitting 100+ degree temperatures, or getting into the bitter colds in the Panhandle?
Now actually that's something that I do have first-hand experience with. And I can tell you this because I spent a little bit of time in Afghanistan with the dogs. And it's amazing because in Afghanistan, right, when I was in Bagram, which Bagram is it's a region of Afghanistan that when it's hot, it's really hot, like 130 degrees. And when it's cold, it's really cold. It goes into both extremes. It's pretty interesting. Like we would take pride in our dog. Like our dogs could work at 125-degree weather. They could do searches, which a dog here that is not acclimated to that, they'd be out there for like 15 minutes and they'd be gassing out here. But our dogs, simply through acclimation, would be able to work in that environment. But even when we thought, wow, our dogs are doing amazing, we would see stray Afghan dogs in temperatures that we would even go, it is too hot and it's been way too long to keep our dogs working. We got to give our dogs a break. We would see stray Afghan dogs, sometimes with puppies, and blistering hot temperatures. And we'd be like, and there's like nothing for miles. You're like, how did these dogs do it? Well, the key is acclimation. The dogs are such adaptive. It's something we talked about we touched on in a previous show. But dogs are so incredibly adaptable that we just generally don't grasp how incredibly adaptable they are. And I would say, how do we train for the heat? I know from first-hand experience is to acclimate them to it. Not to go, all right, it's hot, get used to it, because that'll kill them. But more like, I know it's a little bit warm. We don't have to go inside just because it's a little bit warm. We're going to gradually push that that edge a little bit more. Where, yes, I know you're hot. We're going to leave you out. We're going to stay out for a little bit longer, and then we're going to come in. And as much as we can to do that and gradually push that. And you notice these dogs that get acclimated to the heat do well better in the heat than dogs are always in the AC, always inside, and just go outside just when they have to. Even from a competitor standpoint, I do protection training. We train all year round. Doesn't matter if it's hot or if it's cold. And even when it's really hot, we still train. And there are events that still go on in the summer. So the events don't just shut down for the summer. So we'll notice that the dogs that do spend a lot of time training outside, they do better in the summer months. There are dogs that don't. Their owners don't even like the heat, so they don't train in the heat as much. And you see, like they train outside, the dog's already going, I want to go inside, it's way too hot. So acclimation is definitely the key, but it has to be in a gradual enough manner that you're not killing the dog.
And that's a year-round.
And that's for that's for the heat and the cold. Now, there are things that you have to be aware of, within reason. If it's like 0 degrees Fahrenheit or below 0, your dog could be acclimated all you want. Your dog's still gonna die if you just leave it outside overnight and you just leave it chained to a tree. There's so much acclimation can do, before biology finally goes, this doesn't work for us.
Well, that's a good segue into our last question here: balancing work and rest. How do you ensure a farm dog gets enough rest and recovery time while still fulfilling their duties?
So rest and recovery would be different for each type of dog. So the herding dog, obviously, the herding breed, like the herding dog, the one that is rounding up the sheep and the cattle, these dogs love to work so much they'll literally work themselves to death. So you have to actually stop them, because they won't tell you, I'm done, I need a break. They'll go until they die. That's how amazing they are. That's how that's how committed they are to their work, because that's what they were bred for. So for them, you have to look at some factors like, is the panting incredibly heavy? Are their tongues hanging way out of their mouth? Right? If their tongues are hanging way out of their mouths, and they're just panting, and you can hear a lot of like breathing from the throat, tongues are hanging way out, you're now going into that possibly dangerous area of work where you have to go time out. We got to put you away. We got to cool you off. We have to put you inside because the dog's not going to rest. You have to make it rest. The livestock guardian dogs a little bit different. They're not really straining themselves. They're more like living there. So they're resting essentially the entire time. They're not chasing things. They're just there. Exactly. They're just there as like bouncers. So I would say,
That's a good way.
yeah, so essentially for them, the work or the rest would be more like, all right, is it getting dangerously hot? Have you been out there dangerously, too long? Is it getting dangerously freezing? Have you been out there way too long? Then that's when we would go, all right, we need to give you some time to get off. Another thing too, this is a common mistake. The livestock guardian dogs are typically hairy. If you look at Great Pyrenees, they got a lot of hair. That is for a reason. That's not just to keep them warm when it's cold, but even in the heat, it actually insulates them from the heat. So a common mistake that a lot of people make is they'll go, make your life easier. We're gonna just shave you, not realizing that will actually heat them up even more, because the sun now is going directly on their skin, because now they don't have that layer of insulation to keep the sun directly away from the skin. So, but yeah, those would be some things that would be prudent to keep in mind whenever you have these types of dogs.
Yeah, I didn't realize this was a little different topic than normal, but we are in a rural area here, and there's a lot of farm dogs, ranch dogs out there, and they are, as you pointed out, there's different jobs for different breeds.